Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session on Fixed Layout Accessibility Initiative at the Digital Publishing Summit 2023. I'd like to start by thanking our sponsors, as usual, so Radium Foundation, Glassbox, Audio Boost, and Demarc for their support, and obviously Fondation Elia, who collaborated on the event accessibility session in the framework of their project Albus. Today, we have the privilege of delving into an important topic within the realm of EPUB accessibility. In the recent time, the working group dedicated to EPUB at the French Publisher Association, SNE, has taken up the challenge of exploring how to create accessible fixed layout EPUBs. While accessibility in fixed layout EPUBs has its limitation, the question arises, are there technical solutions that can surpass this limitation? To reply to this, we have our esteemed speaker, Vincent Gros, ebook and data specialist at Hachette Livre, who will shed light on one of these promising initiatives known as the hybrid EPUB. Vincent is the creator of the ebook factory framework and is also a specialist in data-driven projects. Throughout this presentation, he will discuss the advantages and potential drawbacks associated with this initiative. Before we begin, I would like to remind all of you that this session is being recorded, so you can revisit the content later or share it with colleagues who couldn't join us today. Additionally, if you're a member of EDR Lab, you will receive written synthesis of this session and all the other sessions of the summit after the event. Now, without further ado, I will welcome Vincent Gros as he takes us on this journey, and please feel free to ask any question you may have during this presentation in the Q&A box. So at the bottom of your screen, you click Q&A, you can send your question, and he will address them at the end. Thank you, and thank you again, Vincent, for being here. I give you the floor.
Thank you, Marie-Laurence. I will start by sharing my screen so you can see on the slide. Okay, it's working. Hello, everyone. So Hachette Livre is an active member of the EPUB and accessibility ecosystem, for sure. But for this session, I won't talk about Hachette. I would love to talk about the Book Factory framework and all we did since the last Digital Publishing Summit in Madrid as well, but maybe another time. But today, I'm here to represent a working group called Norms and Standards, standard in French, from the French Publishers Association, and its recent thoughts about accessible fixed layout EPUB. Before I begin, a few words about the French Publishers Association and the working group. The French Publishers Association represents the trade publishing industry with more than 700 members. And since 2008, a working group has been set up to look at standards and specifications for ebooks, hence the name of the group. It's an interprofessional group that brings together publishers, metadata specialists, booksellers, the French National Library, and the French Ministry of Culture. For several years now, the group's work has been focused on accessibility, and some important outcomes came up in the last few years. First, the group released a technical charter to produce born accessible reviewable EPUBs. Version 1.2 of the charter has been available since June 2021. The main goal was to produce a shared document directly usable to help publishers and ebook producers to comply with the European Accessibility Act. It contains a reminder of the context, detailed functional and technical specifications, implementation examples, and a webography of accessibility standards. For attendees who are French speakers, you can find it on the French Publishers Association website. The working group plans to update it in the coming months to rely on EPUB 3.3 and EPUB Accessibility 1.1. After this technical charter, the group released a note about alternative text for images and organized a workshop on that. The last version has been available since October 2022. The note contains best practices and how to use Ace by Daisy and the Thorium reader to check alternative text. And this year, the group has started to work on accessibility issues in fixed layout EPUB. And aside from W3C and standard efforts, the objective for the group is to follow the first experimentations and technical approaches worldwide and to talk about them. In April this year, based on our first discussions, I wrote a technical note about some of the approaches, and here I am with you now to talk about them. So let's talk about fixed layout and to start the main differences with referable. I'm going to push open doors here so everyone can be at the same level of understanding before I go further. As a start, let's go back in time more than a decade ago. For me, that was the beginning of my unexpected journey in the EPUB world. At that time, the fixed layout was not part of EPUB. Apple created the fixed layout format as an extension of the referable-only EPUB 2 format in 2010. And as its use became increasingly widespread as a replacement for PDF, the IDPF, who was in charge of EPUB before W3C, decided to specify the fixed layout format first as a note in 2012, then to integrate it fully into the next versions of EPUB from EPUB 3.0.1 in 2014. From the first note in 2012, and this is still the introduction of the fixed layout format you can read in EPUB 3.3 specification, I quote, EPUB documents, unlike print books or PDF files, are designed to change. The content flows or reflows to fit the screen and to fit the needs of the reader. But this principle doesn't work for all types of documents. Sometimes content and design are so intertwined they cannot be separated. And this is still the case today for fixed layout. The main difference between referable and fixed layout is that for some publications, the layout is as important as the content. You can think about children's picture books, cookbooks, graphic novels, travel guides, technical manuals, for instance. In these cases, producing a fixed layout can be a right choice. Fixed layout, by definition, maintains the intended layout and cannot be modified by the user. This will cause challenges for some users for the accessibility, as they won't be able to customize the formatting, customize the font, the size of the text, the line spacing, the background and foreground colors, for example. And the behavior for reading apps is not the same between fixed layout and referable. So let me show you very quickly using the Thorium reader, the difference between referable and fixed layout. So one cool thing about Thorium is that you can open several times the same books or open several books at the same times. And so we can compare different books. So that's really great when we want to show some things. The first one on the left is a referable, it's a fiction novel, and the second one is a fixed layout about cocktails. If I show you the main differences between referable and fixed layout, if I click on the button for the settings, the interface is in French, but the settings, the button remains the same. If I click on it for the referable, I can specify the size of the text. I can use a specific font and change a lot of things inside the for the content, so I can customize my reading experience. On the other side, on the right side of my screen, if I click on the size of the text for the fixed layout, there's no change at all. I can't customize the reading experience. The only thing I can do, the only action I can do, is to use this button to zoom in or zoom out the page. So if I need to increase the size of the page and I have to scroll horizontally or vertically the content to for my reading experience. So the customization are deactivated for the fixed layout. All I can do is zoom in or zoom out. The main problem for fixed layout is the inability to adapt content to transform the text that is mentioned in the draft document of accessible fixed layout from the W3C. Once again, I quote, in particular, the needs of people with low vision or learning disabilities that rely on the transformation of text are still almost impossible to accommodate in fixed layout content. Content creators concerned about this may choose not to use fixed layout. So that's really important. By nature, fixed layout ebooks can't have as many accessibility features as referable ebooks. You can still follow these steps to ensure a fixed layout ebook is as accessible as possible. So you can ensure that the reading order is correct. That's really important. Include, of course, image descriptions for all significant images. Include as much navigation as possible. And when I talk about navigation, I talk about HTML headings, landmarks, the table of contents, and the page list. If possible, make sure the font is as legible as it can be, and if possible, a clean font and sufficient color contrast. And of course, last but not least, add accessibility metadata. Following EPUB Accessibility 1.1 about the WCAG requirements, so the main requirements for accessibility from W3C, it may be possible to create fixed layout EPUB publications that conform to WCAG 2.0, which is the minimum requirement in EPUB Accessibility 1.1, but conforming to the latest versions of WCAG 2.1 and in the future 2.2 is much more difficult due to the reflow requirements that was added in 2.1. So all the adaptation of the text of the content we're talking about is mostly impossible in fixed layout. After all of that, after this overview between fixed layout and referable and the limit of the accessibility in fixed layout, the question that remains finally is how can we meet the reflow requirement from WCAG 2.1? And before I talk about different approaches for fixed layout, of course, if you can produce a referable EPUB, then do it. It's the best option for accessibility. But sometimes, for some reasons, we're stuck with the fixed layout format. So let's see the different approaches. Before I talk about the different approaches for fixed layout, if you can, I share the main idea of the two approaches. For me, this seems to be very similar to the immersive reader you can use in several browsers. I show you in Microsoft Edge very quickly. So you can see the example on the slide, but I show you directly. Up. So this is the website of the French Publisher Association, the page in English. This is that there is a specific formatting for this website. And if I click on this button, I can open the immersive reading, the immersive reader for Age, and I will not have all the elements, all the decorative images and so on, not several columns, but a flow of the content, a simple flow of the content that I can use for my reading experience. I can change the size of the text as we do for referable content. I can change the font. I can add spacing between letters for dyslexia, for example. So this is really the idea we would like to have in fixed layout. With that idea in mind, first attempt, multiple rendition publications. So first approach, first attempt to meet a reflow requirement. EPUB multiple rendition publications is a feature first specified in 2015, 1 year after including fixed layout format in EPUB. Fixed layout was in 2014, fully integrated in 2014. Multiple rendition publications enables more than one representation of the content or rendition in one single EPUB file. The starting point of that is that there is no restriction in the EPUB specification on the number of OPF files you can have in one EPUB file. So you can imagine several renditions of the content based on several OPF, several declaration of the content in the EPUB file. Very simply, to explain how we can produce an EPUB with multiple renditions, each rendition, each representation of the content is declared by one OPF file. For our case, for the accessibility, if there are two renditions in the EPUB, we will have one rendition for the fixed layout format and one for the reflowable format. So there are two OPF files. Each OPF file is declared in the container.xml as usual, in the meta-inf folder. The first file, the first OPF file declared in the container.xml file will be the default representation. For our case, fixed layout will be the default representation, and the second representation, the referable one, will be for accessibility purposes. Metadata shared by renditions is declared in a common metadata.xml file. Rendition specific metadata, so for example, the format, because we will have one version for fixed layout and one for referable, and the OPF file corresponding to the rendition. Properties for selecting one rendition over another are defined in the container.xml. In our case, we will use the rendition layout to specify whether the representation is pre-paginated, which is the term for fixed layout, or referable. And there are other properties. For example, you can use rendition language if you would like to produce a multiple language EPUB. And with these steps, if I lose you, don't worry. That's one of the reasons why multiple rendition is not a good candidate. So there was a discussion about multiple rendition started in 2020 in order to simplify the specifications for the release of EPUB 3.3. Multiple rendition publication has been removed from the main EPUB core specification, and multiple rendition publication is now an additional note. So it's outside of the core specification for EPUB. And this move is justified by the lack of implementations of this feature. They may have partial use in Japan, but not more. There is a confusion caused by its vocabulary in the EPUB specifications. So there was a confusion because now EPUB 3.3 is really understandable. There's a complexity to produce EPUB with multiple representation or renditions, and to read EPUB with multiple renditions. And now there's modern web technologies that can do the same thing. And for example, HTML and media queries can do the same thing than one of the property which was rendition media. More than that about EPUB public rendition publication, multiple rendition publication. In 2023, this year, 8 years after its creation, EPUB multiple rendition publications is still considered an experimental feature with little or no support. So it's part of the overview of EPUB 3.3, and I quote the specification. There are currently 2 such experimental features, multiple rendition publications and text-to-speech enhancements. Publishers may use these features in their publications, but should do so with the awareness that there may be limited support. And finally, for multiple renditions, there is an existing confusion regarding the obligation in the official European text to have alternate renditions or alternate presentations. And this confusion has been cleared up in the W3C note about EPUB accessibility and EU Accessibility Act mapping. And once again, I quote the note. In the context of the European Accessibility Act, the term rendition does not refer to the EPUB 3 multiple renditions specification. It means the ability to access content in different ways. So to conclude on multiple renditions, even if it could be a good idea for accessibility, in the current EPUB 3.3 ecosystem at W3C, EPUB multiple rendition publication has not been chosen as a solution for EPUB accessibility or specifically for accessibility in fixed layout. So first attempt, maybe not a good candidate, but second attempt, let's talk about hybrid EPUB. To start with hybrid EPUB, I just would like to show you 2 old projects in the EPUB ecosystem. The first one is the EPUB sample projects. There is a table with all the samples you can try, or you can download it, try it on your favorite reading app. And at the bottom of the table, one of the last sample of the project, there is the voyage of life. And if you read the description of the voyage of life, the technical description, of course, the description says it's a mixed, referable, and fixed layout document. So that's an interesting idea. It seems that we can mix referable and fixed layout in one EPUB file. That's the same for the second project. The second project is the EPUB test suite samples project. This is the old one, not the new one about accessibility presented this morning, but there is an old one to check CSS, metadata in DOPF, fallbacks, and so on. And in this series of EPUB tests, there is 2 EPUBs, 2 EPUB files to test mixed referable and fixed layout content. The first one is, if you would like to try the files, the first one is the 208, and the second one is the 209. The first one is fixed layout. It's a fixed layout EPUB with referable content. And the second one is a referable EPUB with fixed layout content. So the reverse one. So that's interesting because it seems that we have a solution, maybe one start of a solution for years now. We can mix fixed layout and referable in one EPUB file. And if we browse the code, for example, for the Voyage of Life, in the first project, in the EPUB samples project, you can browse and check the OPF file directly. You don't have to download it to check it on GitHub. So for the Voyage of Life, you can see in the metadata block, there is no rendition information. That means this is a referable content. By default, an EPUB without rendition information is a referable content. So this is a referable. And if we check the spine block now, the spine element, we can see that there is properties attributes that specify some of the content documents are pre-paginated and not referable. You can see S1B, S2B, S3B, and S4B are pre-paginated content and not referable content. So this is how technically we can add reflow content inside one fixed layout EPUB. And with that in mind, maybe we can meet the reflow requirement for WCAG 2.1. Indeed, in the EPUB core specification, EPUB 3.3, there is 2 levels to specify the format of the content. The first one is the most widespread use today. The first one is at the publication level. So in the metadata block in the OPF, if we talk about a pre-paginated content, so the first level is at the publication level, and there is a second level at the content document level or the spine level to specify for part of the content, for a page, a chapter, for part of the content, that this is a specific format. If we would like to create such a mixed fixed layout referable EPUB file, how we can implement that? So if we start from an existing fixed layout EPUB file, we have to export the content from the fixed layout version from each page, the text and the images as one or more HTML files, declare them in the manifest of the EPUB file, of course, specify in the spine, so add it in the spine or the different files in the spine, and specify the format with rendition layout referable property. By default, this file or these files can be hidden with the linear attribute. And of course, after that, don't forget to add all the accessibility features required in referable, like we do for a full EPUB referable file. To switch from the fixed layout to the referable version, we can add a first page about accessibility, about the accessibility of the content, indicate that the fixed layout has limited accessibility, and if you need a reflowable version, you can click on the link. You add the referable version with a link, and after that you access to the referable content. So this is a simple version of what we can do to mix fixed layout and referable EPUB. Of course, there are issues. There are some issues, for example, about the navigation. The navigation file is based on the navigation of the default representation, so the fixed layout representation. And because of that, you have to imagine how we can use the navigation and go back to the referable version. So we have to think about that. We can add some buttons on the beginning of every chapter, for example. But this seems to be doable. Some questions to conclude about the hybrid EPUB. Can we distribute them today? Yes. We can distribute that. It's a fixed layout EPUB with some parts as referable, but it's still a fixed layout EPUB as we do today. Can we read them? Yes. By default, we use the fixed layout version, and using the link, we can access to the referable content. Let me show you using Thorium. Once again. So not this one. So I downloaded the different EPUB files from the EPUB sample project and the EPUB test suite. You'll see, so for example, the Voyage of Life. If I go to my books, you'll see some of them are EPUB, some of them are EPUB fixed layout. So if I use this one, and maybe I will open it twice to compare the different views. Okay, so on the left, this is the fixed layout part of the content. So you'll see this is, I can zoom it like we usually do for fixed layout. And this is the referable. You see, I can scroll it. I can change the size of the text, for example, or the fonts. So we have both referable. The first one, at the beginning of the book, is a referable part, and after that there is a fixed layout part. So it's not the same behavior that we can imagine for accessibility, because both are combined. But if the referable part is hidden, there's only the fixed layout as the default, and you can have a link to click and to access to the referable version. Or you can put the referable version at the end of the spine to use the referable and indicate it in the navigation file. So just to show you, it works on Thorium. I checked on Adobe Digital Editions. It works. Sometimes it crashes Adobe Digital Editions, but it works. And in books from Apple as well. So we can distribute them, we can read them, or maybe we have to upgrade a little some reading apps, but it seems feasible. Can we produce them at an industrial level and at low cost? I would say yes, but it depends. It will depend on the content. That remains the same question that for accessible in general for fixed layout. It depends on the layout, how we can export the text and the images, how we can respect the reading order. If I take, for example, the immersive reader on Microsoft Edge, sometimes the immersive reader is not available, so it's not possible. And sometimes it can bug on some aspect of the page. So it's not perfect. It really depends on the quality of the production. If we imagine a great quality of the production from the source, the software you use, or the fixed layout itself, if we have all the best practices for accessibility, the reading order, the navigation, etc., we can imagine a way to export automatically the content as a referable. Maybe you can export the fixed layout from InDesign, a referable version from InDesign as well, and just add the referable in your fixed layout file, for example. That's one way to do it. And you can build some scripts to export as when you're sure the reading order is okay, you can work on it. So it really depends on the quality of the fixed layout or the source you will use for that. To conclude, to wrap it all up, don't forget there is no standard rules for now. It's still under discussion. All these approaches are experimental. We know that to build the fixed layout EPUB as accessible as possible, we have to fix this reflow requirement to meet the reflow requirement from WCAG. Don't bet on multiple rendition publications. Very probably too complex to use it for accessibility. Hybrid EPUB could be a start to embed a simple referable mirror of the fixed layout content. It's one approach, maybe still in discussion. And this was just food for thought. All of this, once again, is experimental. And I hope this session will be as useful as possible for everyone. Thank you for your time and for listening to me. And of course, the journey continues.
Thank you very much, Vincent. So we are inviting all participants to send their question in the Q&A box if you have any after this presentation. So feel free, you just have the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. You can click on it and send your questions.
Yes, so the first question about Laura Brady for a reading system that supports hybrid EPUBs. So I show you on Thorium, and it once again, it's not a new technology. It's an old one. Some of the readers already support the mixed referable fixed layout content or fixed layout referable content. So you can try it on your favorite reading app to see if it works or no. Or not, and if not, maybe you can, for example, if it doesn't work for Kobo, maybe you can create a bug on GitHub for Kobo to see if they can upgrade their reader to support the format at the spine level. And can I show an hybrid EPUB in one reader? Yes, I did that. And if you would like to try it by yourself, don't hesitate to use the EPUB Samples project. There is other great samples as well, not only for this topic. And the old EPUB test suite that's on GitHub as well. You can try the mix, referable and fixed layout content. It works on Thorium, so that's a start. And I'm sure it can work maybe on Medium and others. So we just have to try it and discuss about it to see if it's a good solution for accessibility in fixed layout EPUB or not.
Thank you. Do we have other questions? I see that in the chat, people are also talking.
Maybe another one.
Bartel saying, thanks for all this information. There are tools to produce quality outputs, just like the movement platform.
I didn't try to convert this EPUB to Mobi or to equivalent file for Amazon. It's something we can do, and if it doesn't work, once again, we can discuss with Amazon to see if they can support this kind of approach for accessibility. For now, I would say because of the conversion from EPUB fixed layout to the Amazon one, which is print replica, I don't think it works if we do a fixed layout file, but maybe on referable, if we do a referable and we add fixed layout at the spine level, it could work. We have to try it on different Kindle devices and apps to see if it works or not.
And we have another question in the chat, not in the Q&A box, but in the chat. Which is the best choice for ebook fixed or refill?
The best choice is referable. No discussion about that. There's not, the best is referable. For accessibility and for other aspects of the content, it's part of the quotes I made from the specifications. The default behavior of EPUB is the content can flow and reflow. A fixed layout is similar to PDF. If you would like to have an EPUB file for accessibility, and if you can produce them, do it using referable format.
Okay. Another question was sent to us by Mia Kiersey. Have you tried to add media release audio to hybrid EPUB?
No, we didn't try to add media overlays. I'm sure it works because the content. What we should check if we have media overlay on the fixed layout part and media overlay on the referable part, if the reading app can behave correctly. But beside that, it's media overlay on referable and media overlay on fixed layout. If the reading app already support that, there's no problem.
I don't see any more questions. Last few seconds for our audience, and in case we are reaching the end of the session, so we will soon close it. We received a long message from Ken Jones. Thanks, Vincent. It is my opinion that with a well-structured and accessible fixed layout EPUB, we can keep to one source file and so remove the need to have a link to move to a secondary refillable version, and instead only switch to a CSS that ignores the unwanted aspects of fixed layout, absolute positioning, fixed front attributes. I'd love to talk with you more about this, and we'll contact you by email. Sure.
Yes, I'm sure, Ken, you are referencing about media queries, for example, and we test that as well. There is some improvement we can do on that. And of course, we can talk about your solution and this approach to see how we can maybe combine them or skip the referable parts if we have a great CSS.
And we received another question from A. Saravanan, which I will let you read also.
Fixed layout with div or span class for each and every line to accommodate as like in source file. Exhibiting reading in order through screen reader is challenging one. How we can overcome for this? It will depend on the fixed layout. We have to try and to see the limit of the solution. One limit for the production, actually, for the production of the fixed layout is we have a lot of useless code, useless tags to position the text, position the different objects in fixed layout. And for example, vocal synthesis work on fixed layout, But if there is too much tags in it, they stop, or they always stop. And if you have a line from line, a code line from line and not paragraphs, the vocal synthesis stops for each line and not at the end of the sentence. So we have a lot to do to have a proper code in fixed layout. So high quality of the code in fixed layout before we can talk about accessibility or accessible fixed layout.
Thank you. No more question, and I think we really need to close the session because another one is starting in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I just want to thank the other members of the group. It's collaborative work. So all the discussions comes from the working group. So thank you, the French Publisher Association and the working group to work on this very difficult aspect of accessibility for fixed layout. And thank you everyone for your question. That was really great. Thank you.
And thank you, Vincent, for agreeing to be part of this Digital Publishing Summit and for your presentation. It was really, really interesting. And as we can see, sparked a lot of questions. So everyone, feel free to contact the group at the SNE and to engage with our speakers in the lobby chat if you want. And otherwise, we will see you at the next session, which is on digital textbook and starts in 10 minutes. So thank you again, Vincent. Thank you, everyone. And see you soon.
Thank you. Goodbye.